You know my story, right?
Name is Tom Rossmassler. I founded the company in 2018, Hempstone, primarily to address embodied carbon or the carbon in building materials.
Tell me a little bit about Hempstone. Where are you located?
Yep, Hempstone is in western Massachusetts. What's called the Happy or Pioneer Valley, a beautiful part of Massachusetts, New England. And from there, we do work all over the country, really, in different formats. And for installations, we'll actually do Hempcrete and hemp natural building installations throughout New England. Next year, we might be even in the South a little bit, but generally within a day or two drive of New England. But then we also do training and consulting and supply materials for natural building all over the country.
And where are you originally from? New England, or were you up there because of business reasons?
No, yeah, I'm actually originally from New Jersey, which is where we're training today, which is fun to come back to my home state. And I moved to Massachusetts when I met my current wife, and we built a life in Massachusetts.
Yeah, awesome. Now, your history, were you always in construction before Hempstone, and where? Kind of tell me the story of what led up to you founding Hempstone.
Yeah, I did. I did kind of after college started in construction. I ended up friends with my parents. I had done some deck building and carpentry over the years as a teenager, make some money, fence building and such. And so when friends of my parents were like trying to do an addition in New Jersey to their house and build a new 3-car garage, they were getting quotes here very high, and they said, "Hey, maybe this is a good marriage. You have some experience, you can do it." So they saved some money. I got some experience, and then one job led to another. So there were a number of years in New Jersey where I was a carpenter, contractor, building houses, and I also started a home inspection business. So it's around the built environment, understanding buildings, houses. And then when I did move to New England, I kind of started over, and I stayed within the built environment, but I was in real estate. So I got into commercial real estate appraisal, institutional big projects all around the country, large 400 unit apartment complexes, really big, expensive projects. And then instead of sort of commenting on what things cost in appraisal, I actually wanted to get into the deals. And so I moved into acquisitions. And so I was going around the country and DC, Baltimore, Virginia, Colorado, all around New England, Atlanta, going and buying large institutional real estate for pension funds and for eventually for a REIT, a real estate investment trust. So I was an acquisitions officer for large deals, hundreds of millions of dollars at real estate. And that was in Boston. And eventually kind of got sick of the rat race. It's kind of can be a soulless thing, just focused on money and things like that. And so we made a quality of life move, my family, out to western Massachusetts, which is a little bit more bang for your buck and a little more rural and a little less hectic, no traffic. And so we love where we live. And I did affordable housing for a time there, building affordable housing, which is so rewarding, mission-driven things. And then from there, I was tasked to start a worker cooperative. So I started an energy performance company that focused on building upgrades, building performance, and it was mostly insulation, air sealing, and it was kind of an interesting task because it was the desire is to have it be a worker-owned business. But we also, the people that were funding it, there was some health and human services federal money. There was a couple nonprofits, Puerto Rican nonprofit, farming community that were involved in starting this. And they really wanted to be of the community and sort of a Van Jones model where it's like actually greening from the ground up, the bottom of the pyramid, getting people involved in not just industry and construction, but having ownership. You typically have being in construction, these are some of Massachusetts' poorer cities in Western Mass, and these are typically, people of color, Latinos, who just needed a green jobs career ladder that we were building. So we were, hiring and training and doing a lot of hand holding to build that company up. Eventually, we're doing more than just residential. We started doing dorms for colleges, did hundreds of dorms for some of the prestigious colleges in New England, and became known as sort of the go-to group that really understood buildings well, both commercial and residential. But still, we were just kind of working with trying to keep their electric and utility and gas bills down. And that was operational. That's what we call operational carbon. And we weren't addressing the fundamental issues of buildings, what we put into the buildings in the first place, the steel, the concrete, the wood. So I founded Hempstone while I was still running Energia, that cooperative, to really try to get at the embodied carbon of buildings, which we're starting to understand is a big piece of the pie as well. And so trying to look at natural materials, because the only way you can really get there with carbon is to grow something. And so the beauty of hemp and hempcrete and products like that is you can grow something, lock away some carbon, and then lock it in the building and store it and sequester it for a time and take it out of the atmosphere and try to like address climate change using the buildings themselves. So, and because buildings typically have been one of the biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions.
It's amazing that I've been following this as far as all the way back to when I was in college at Drexel University, graduated in '08.
Yep.
And my independent study was with a beer distributor, a beer wholesaler.
Yeah.
And my independent study was an entire green initiative for the entire company. So it's one of the largest beer distributors in the country.
Yep.
And what I did was, what I was intrigued about what you said about the New England was that I've been up there a lot in Maine and all these other areas.
Yep.
And know how recycling has been a big part of everything, and
Sure.
caring about the environment has been a big part of it.
Yep.
So literally, I was writing all these proposals for distributors, even from the very smallest point of like when they go, like what I noticed in New England was beer distributors, when they go to over to liquor stores, they pick up the recyclings after they drop the pallets of full product.
Yeah, it's not a one way. They come back with,
And then that was like that became the linchpin to my entire presentation.
Yeah.
Was the amount of American distribution companies that could do a relay point, which
Yep.
do it all day long,
Yep.
and drive empty trucks back.
Yep.
And I really was like, it was just that simplest thing. And it's amazing how you go in certain places to see it.
Yeah.
So back to this, though,
Yeah.
I was really amazed to see, and it's just by coincidence that I'm a fan of what you guys are doing, but I'm also here reporting this today. So to be
Sure.
honest with you, I've been got hemp certified years ago whenever the hemp bill passed, and so I got
Nice.
to sell and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
everything. So with this product-based system, what are some of the this when you're making the hempcrete and you're making these building materials, like I obviously would love to eventually have a cabin one day that's made of it.
Yeah.
But I also understand that there's at this current stage there's sometimes financial hurdles that could adhere to it, as well as like we talked about earlier, you were talking about the workshop.
Yeah.
The manual and customization process of this type of thing.
Right.
What are some hurdles that are out there today that might be, or misconceptions that could allow people a little bit easier into the world of building and hiring people like yourself to kind of grow and kind of build that the raw materials awareness and education?
Yeah, no, there's a lot. There's a lot of things that come up when you're introducing any new product.
Right.
There's education. There is some baggage that historically hemp and cannabis has had. You know, the material we're using, industrial hemp, is a strain. As any of the ones you use for industrial strain is actually a strain of cannabis sativa. But in our country, we've sort of been highly focused on marijuana, certain strains that give you a psycho, active component that gets you high or medicinal or even CBD. And we really haven't been focused on the industrial side. And in fact, the industrial side has been coupled to the recreational side to the point where, we get people asking stupid questions like, hey, can I smoke that building? As a joke.
Yeah.
But the whole point of industrial hemp is actually to remake a lot of the things that we've historically made that have really been pretty bad for the environment. Plastics, petroleum, hemp and hemp products can be replace a whole host of things that historically have had pretty bad health costs, environmental costs, but we don't build those costs into our products. We just kind of let the environment take the hit, or we let our health take the hit. And we don't ask what is the actual in all of these products. In the built environment, there's a lot of products that go into a house, into a building, and not all of them historically have been particularly healthy. Natural building, hemp and straw and other things like this, also historically have been relegated to the realm of like, well, that's indigenous people, or that's a bunch of hippies, drinking too crunchy and it's not serious and it's not sophisticated and it can't be engineered. And I think a lot of those myths are being dispelled as we educate and understand that, yes, we do have to fit into this very hyper desire for efficiency in building. And the construction industry has historically been pretty slow to change. You can produce a F-150 pickup truck every 6 minutes in Detroit, and then a building's going to take you 9 months from start to finish. So, there are companies trying to do modular and panelized. And what we see is that effort to kind of improve the efficiency of delivering product, because there's a lack of affordable housing, there's all sorts of needs, but people are still kind of doing it the old way in terms of the materials they're using. They might be delivering a product more efficiently or quicker, but it's still plastic, it's still petroleum, it's still unhealthy. And so that doesn't necessarily help long term, especially if we're trying to solve an affordable housing crisis and giving people at the low end of the pyramid the least healthy housing just because we have to do it quickly. So I think there's definitely a role that natural building can play, as we also get away from the kumbaya and all the side of that and say we need to be serious about it. We need to play with the big industrial and people and make it real, efficient, and productive, but not lose values that it comes from, with health and the tying to the land and valuing the land.
I appreciate the way you said that too, and I'll close out with this: is that we've seen a lot of growth in the cannabis industry and hemp industry, but you're right. It's taking that consumption and industrial and separating the two, because it's just the most asinine thing to think about. I mean, my history is in alcohol.
Yep.
We don't look at the tub of 200 proof ethanol that comes out in the 260-gallon drum that goes somewhere as an opportunity to put a straw in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's not the same type of thing. And I think until we get to the place where we can, as human beings, look at rubbing alcohol as not something I consume, but it's also a similar derivation of something I do consume. True. And it's a very poison.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's one of those things where when you get back to the natural side of things, I could spend a whole episode, and maybe someday I will with you, actually, talking about what had happened a long time ago and why we are where we are and we're not so far ahead.
Right.
And why we, as the United States, we're talking about it like we're creating some new thing. But it's I will make a joke. It's pretty much like UFPs and UFOs.
Yeah.
We all say they're not real, but if you look at the rest of the world, every other country has organizations and research and all this other stuff. Yeah. It's the same. Hemp is one of those things where I hate to compare the two as paranormal, but I am in the sense that I want people to understand that's the way they're treating it.
Right.
That's my point.
Yeah.
We can't just put our head in the sand and pretend like it's not been going on forever and everywhere else. And that's my point.
Or that we're inventing it. I mean,
that's what I'm getting at.
This is the point too.
It's not a crazy utopian like arts and music festival thing that people are just dreaming up.
Right.
These are real things. And the point I want to bring in the beginning, where I get passionate about, you brought this up in the workshop, is it's the need for the scale. Because so many times we can sit around and customize ways to do things naturally, but until they're done at scale, they're not going to be done affordably to really make the impact.
Yeah.
And I think what you're doing is so important. That's what I'm getting is in what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's about impact. I mean, we two beautifully healthy houses a year from one contractor is not going to move the needle on millions of houses that are built every year in poor quality. And there is a long sort of historical cultural problem in our country around how we value things. And we kind of more on just to wrap, like to your point, like we created the war on drugs, probably out of reaction to a lot of things that took overblown. And the rest of the world's like, I guess America leads, we'll do what they do. Right. And we export a lot of bad things, and they eat fast, unhealthy food too. Let's export all our chains overseas. Like that, they followed suit initially, but they were some of them, like France, didn't, because they're like, well, this is stupid to incarcerate people for doing essentially, it'll be like incarcerating alcohol, like, people drinking or selling alcohol. So, and then other countries just were quicker to come back to realize the folly of trying to have some kind of war on drugs and to understand that. So they consequently are decades ahead of us. And you think we're innovative, and to your point, we think we're creating new things, but people have done this for centuries, and we're just rediscovering and thinking we're new.
And that is it. And the propaganda generationally infiltrated our community and our infrastructure and our psyche, but it's not the way like that internationally.
Yeah.
And that's one of those funny anomalies of America, how we live in this bubble.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too, because a lot of it, like when you get down to it, it's an agricultural product. Kentucky and Republican representatives were some of the first to embrace it, because it's about saving the family farm. It's about having another crop that can not just be in rotation for health, but actually rebuild the soil, because a lot of the way we farmed has not been healthy. And the aggregation of farms and the loss of family farms and the ability to keep them and the health of farms. And then, of course, moving up the chain, and this supply chain problem in this country around hemp, because it's been so taboo for a while. We had infrastructure previously, but it was sort of, there's been a lot of institutional knowledge and equipment and things that have been lost over the years because we just came down a little too hard and didn't understand the differences between something that could be paper, it could be the Declaration of Independence, it could be a house, and something that actually, like alcohol, can alter your state and be fun and maybe recreational, but maybe it's not going to be as morally uplifting or social redeeming purpose as hemp.
Right. The founding fathers weren't rolling up those papers.
They weren't rolling those papers, and they certainly didn't have high levels of THC we have today, which is a whole nother thing.
Well, I will close out and just kind of in closing, I appreciate what you're doing in the industry. I appreciate the raw material, the natural product. I will let also people know that there is a great, I don't want to call it a revolution or an evolution, but it's just kind of becoming a little bit more mainstream. Yeah. And I think that's the most important thing, is for people to see it, allow it to be mainstream, and understand that hemp is something that paper, material, apparel, building materials, fuel. I mean, there's so many aspects to it. And so thank you for doing what you're doing.
Nate, thank you. Appreciate talking to you.
Absolutely. All right. Take care.
You know my story, right?